I thought when you read history of a new tornado comes someplace, well, Indiana had this and had this and had this, but they never go back to 1941.
Yeah.
And of course, that was just one tornado in town. I have that little flash of irritation because, well, they're not talking about my tornado. It's so far back, it's really lost.
Yep.
And it was on a, I've forgotten what day it was, but it was March the 17th. I remember it was St. Patrick's Day. And we had a tornado come through at night, about 9 o'clock. And I had been put to bed because my parents believed that little children should go to bed about 9 o'clock. And but I was still awake. We lived near a railroad track, so we were used to trains going by. And you often read in the papers after people have experienced a tornado that they sound just like a freight train going by. And that's exactly when I heard it, that it sounded just like a train going by. And my father was in the kitchen, and he realized that was some kind of wind, and he went to the back door to hold it shut. So he must have been experiencing that it was a pretty terrible wind. And then the next thing I knew, my mother or my dad came to get me up because the lights had gone out in the house. Of course, I didn't realize that because I was in the dark bedroom. But this tornado struck a section of our block, the street that I lived on. My house and the house just north of us were the only ones still standing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 or 8 houses on one side of the street that would have been, and about 3 others on our side of the street were demolished. And so when we got up the next morning, there were just these piles of broken boards and windows, and some of the walls may have been standing. The house next door to us, the walls were standing, but the roof was completely off. And so that seemed so strange to look over there and could see the living room that was painted green and into parts of the kitchen. A family in that house that I just talked about was a mother and a dad and a little boy about a year old. And they were not injured, if you can believe that, with that house being destroyed in that fashion. And they grabbed coats and bundled the little boy in a quilt and walked barefooted through their living room that was in shambles and over to our house. And the next morning, when people went into the neighbor's house, the floor was just covered with shards, pieces of glass from all those windows. But their feet were never cut. But I remember everybody marveled at Ed and Helen and Bruce, the little boy. Of course, they were carrying him. Went through that without. And then the other odd thing, my dad then took, I don't know if all 3 of them or just the dad and the little boy, something must have happened to him a little bit. I think the story went that he took them up to the doctor, but he gave Ed, who was had been a football player in high school there, so but he was a large man, his boots to wear, and Ed was able to get them on, and his feet would have been bigger than Dad's. I remember that. Okay, so we didn't have any electricity for several days.
Yeah.
And we lost a couple of trees in front of our house, and generally the only damage done was in the south wall of our living room. And do you know what a 2x4 is? Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's like 2x6s, so it's 2 one way, but it's not like a 2x4, but it's about that wide. And it was blowing through the side of our house, like we had 8-foot ceilings. So up near the bend of where the ceiling met, this 2x6 had been rammed through the wall and into the living room about a foot. So until that could be repaired, several days, here's this big board sticking into the living room. So that shows the force of the... Okay, the force of the board. The trees in front were planted by my dad. He'd gone down to the river bank when they built their 3-room house 10 years prior and pulled up these little saplings, and he got free trees that way and planted those trees, and so they were precious to us. And so then when those 2 trees in front were taken away, then I cried because our trees, I can remember, were gone. Then it took a long time for the houses to, all the ruins being taken away and new ones built. But let's say the tornado came on a Wednesday or Thursday. Sunday, probably Saturday too, but Sunday seemed to be the day that people were free from the rest of the town to come by and look. And so there were streams of traffic. We lived in a very quiet neighborhood, but it was just bumper to bumper, even in those days in that little town, of going to look at the damage from the tornado. So here we were in one of the 2 houses left standing, and I remember we were looking out through our window at all those people going by, gawking at